All right, I think we are live. Hello, everyone. Can you just send a quick message in the chat on the top right of your screen just to make sure that you can hear us, see us well, and make sure that we're online okay? Um, Hello, everyone. So my name is Gwen. I'm head of strategy and business development for Station F, and I'm going to be the one interviewing Fritz today, who's been kind enough to spare an hour from Montana to talk with us today about ClassPass, but not just ClassPass, also his journey as an investor. And yeah, so we are on Livestorm. So on the top right of your screen, you have the chat. You also have the question box where you can ask your question about each other's question, and we're going to be able to address them in the second part of this discussion. This is going to be from 45 minutes to an hour, and yeah, let's get started. So Fritz, thank you so much for taking an hour to speak with us today. Maybe as a means of introduction, instead of making mistakes on who you are, I would just let you present yourself.
Sure. Yeah. Well, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. And hello, everyone. So yeah, I'm Fritz Lanman. I am the CEO of ClassPass. I now live in Missoula, Montana, which is a move I made actually before the pandemic. ClassPass was started in New York, and we were split between New York and SF. And then we opened an office in Montana and now Houston. And so we're a distributed company. We have many offices globally, 30 countries. I got involved in the business originally as an investor. I led the seed round and then the Series A and became the executive chairman of the company. And the founder Pyle asked me to step in and run it after about a year and a half of working together. And I did. Thought it'd be maybe a 1 or 2 year thing and we'd find a new CEO. And here I am almost 6 years later running the company. So before ClassPass, I've been an active angel investor and backed about 100, 150 startups. The ones you would have heard of that are paying for all the ones you haven't heard of and probably never will are Square, Pinterest, Wish, Flexport, some companies like that. Was lucky enough to be a part of. I'm also a serial entrepreneur. I built 3 startups before ClassPass and exited each of those. And then before becoming an entrepreneur and angel investor, I spent about almost a decade at Microsoft as a product manager and working in corporate strategy.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Well, you already touched upon my first question a little bit. So from what I understood, you got involved very early on in the story of ClassPass that was founded, if I'm not mistaken, in 2013. And so you've been an investor since the beginning of ClassPass. Can you tell me about this transition on how you start being an investor into a company all the way to running it like today as a CEO? What happened?
It was an unexpected transition. Yeah. So on the history, it's been a while, but Pyle Kadakia Puji is the founder of the company. She's now our executive chairman. And she had been working on many different iterations of ClassPass before it became ClassPass, before it even was focused just on fitness. I think the original concept was called Dabble Now NYC. And it was a bunch of different experiences in New York. And then she started to focus more on studio fitness and it became Classtivity. And when I met her, it was when she was pivoting to ClassPass. So she had figured out that actually if you launched a recurring subscription that gave people repeated access to studios, basically gave them a kind of a food delivery app like experience where instead of ordering the same food delivery every time, you could find 3, 4, 5, 6 different favorites and go back to it over and over. So I met her when she was pivoting the company into ClassPass, raising a seed round for that pivot. And I led the seed round. Pyle and I hit it off within 10 minutes of meeting. I, told her that I would invest, and she knew that she wanted to partner with me. And I helped her put together a great round of other investors who I thought would be really additive and who would believe in the concept and be complementary to Pyle. And then I became an advisor, and we just started spending more and more time talking about the business. And Pyle and I have very complementary skills. I mean, she was a management consultant and worked in the music industry, is incredible at brand. She is the customer that she was building the product for. I have a background in strategy, which she did as well, but more maybe product and technology orientation, and had spent time doing pricing at Microsoft. So we had really complementary skills, and she just kept drawing me in more and more. Seed investor, then made me an advisor, which meant I would spend more time on helping her than a company I would just write a check to. Then when it came time to raise her Series A, I introduced her to 7 or 8 great VC friends of mine. She had a load of term sheets, but she was just really scared about bringing somebody onto her board that she had only met in the context of fundraising. And so one of the VCs actually offered me to take the board seat for their firm, but I decided to put my own investment in and co-lead it with another VC, CRV Ventures, Sargur, because I didn't want to sort of become a venture partner at a VC fund. I want to stay independent. And Pyle asked me, hey, I wish I could take your money. And I found a way to do that with my partner, Hank. So we put a bunch of money in the Series A, and that's when I became the chairman of the business. So then for about a year, I was just the chairman of ClassPass, and the business was taking off. But as the role for Pyle changed from managing, a team of 10 people to managing a team of 100, and where your time shifts from being really focused on product and launch marketing to HR and operations and fundraising and performance marketing, and engineering recruiting, she just was finding it less inspired, and we had a bunch of copycat clones and stuff, and we talked about hiring COOs, but again, Pyle was very apprehensive about bringing in somebody from the outside who she didn't know, and so she said to me, I'm not enjoying this job, and I think you'd be better suited to running the day-to-day at the scale that we're at with your skills and interests. So, can I get you to come spend time here? And we kind of agreed to do it and said, hey, this will be an experiment. Maybe it'll be a year. So we didn't change titles at that time, but that's when I started operating the business. And after a year, it was just like, it was the roles, it didn't even need to, I think we actually did have a conversation about it at the end, but we'd already sort of naturally changed roles where she was advising on strategy, leaning in on certain product areas, marketing approach and, brand strategy. And I was sort of really in the weeds on the operational details of the business. And so we sort of had naturally changed titles, made that official. And, so now it's been coming up on 6 years that I've been operating the business, 4.5 years since I've had the CEO title, but very natural kind of organic evolution of roles built on trust, built on, Pyle's self-awareness around what she liked to do, what she didn't want to do. A lot of my founders and CEOs, entrepreneurs that I back, they need to prove that they are a great CEO and that they like the job. But the job is very different at each stage of the company. And, I go through my own trials and tribulations from 100-person company to 300 to 500 to now working in 30 countries. So it was really just an organic evolution, and we've had great partnership.
And so what about you in that story? I mean, you founded companies before, you had a few exits, you were an active business angel. What kind of built the energy to come back into an operational role of taking the CEO position?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, it was the mission and the vision of what ClassPass is trying to do. And the fact that, I was really inspired by it. Like ClassPass literally only gets paid if it's convincing its users to work out more. And I've worked for a lot of businesses that had great missions or made a lot of money, but that didn't have that fundamental connection between the financial success of the business and driving a positive outcome for its users, right? We live in a world where we just heard that Instagram has internal reports suggesting that they're aware that they're driving teenage depression, right? And potentially even suicide. I didn't read the report myself. And, nothing against social media, right? But I think that there are hard choices, and that, all of us who work in the technology industry have to be really thoughtful about where we're going to spend our time. So for me, it was first about the mission, and then second about where I thought I could contribute my unique skills to help ClassPass. And really it was kind of, coming in and coming up with a new business model. So we were unlimited workouts, and we moved to a credits-based system where customers buy different subscription tiers, and different spots cost different amount of money. Barry's Bootcamp or Rumble peak time class with a popular instructor is worth more than an off-peak time at a lesser known brand with an unknown instructor. So I was really intrigued by the intellectual challenge of the business model evolution that we were going to have to make ClassPass work better for our merchant partners, but also improve our own unit economics and get users more spots. So we kind of came up with a model that worked for all three constituencies: ClassPass shareholders, merchant partners in the studio and gym side, and end users. And technically, I was just fired up because I saw opportunities to bring machine learning into everything we did. And that started once we moved to credits with giving our gyms and studios automated revenue management, right? So they don't have to do work. They don't have to give us spots. They don't have to price their inventory. We have algorithms that figure out this is how many spots to give ClassPass, and this is how you maximize the revenue on your excess capacity. So they can just give us their API key to their gym management software, sit back and notice more people showing up and get a payment from us, which is mostly pure profit. It's really high margin revenue. And then on the user side, we're trying to introduce machine learning and social curation to give people a playlist of first workouts, but then we're actually expanding beyond workouts. So, in the last year, we've added tens of thousands of wellness and beauty salons. So now you can get a massage or cryo or acupuncture or hair, nails, facials, skin treatments, infrared sauna. And so, we see an opportunity to take what we are really good at, which is for the merchant, optimizing revenue, and for the user, taking the friction out of them discovering great experiences and taking those experiences and going and filling their life with more fulfilling experiences. And we saw an opportunity to kind of introduce great technology to help that happen and then to expand into new categories. So I just thought, hey, what a great way to spend the next 10 years of my career. I had been a successful investor, and investing is fun because you get to meet so many smart entrepreneurs, learn about new areas, but I don't know if it's fulfilling, at least for me, because you're just an observer. You make a smart bet, great, you make some money, but you can give some advice that could maybe change the inflection of the company. But investors have very limited impact compared to the actual operators. So, and I'd kind of learned that, I'd been a big company executive at Microsoft, a solo entrepreneur starting my first company. The next two companies I served as the executive chairman, and had CEO partners who I kind of trained, developed, and coached. And even that was just like less satisfying. I really kind of learned through those experiences of being an investor, being a big company executive, and being an operator that I find the most fulfillment in rolling up my sleeves and building something with my hands and, being in the trenches with the team. So, but, I was only going to do that if I found something that really spoke to me and that I thought, would align not just with my interests, but my skills.
Amazing. And I want to touch upon, obviously, you are in the fitness space. We are in the middle of COVID. Obviously, the fitness space has been greatly impacted across the board. How did it go for you?
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been easy, right? I wouldn't say that running a fitness company during a global pandemic was high on my list of desired career challenges that I would have to kind of encounter and overcome. Look, I mean, I think none of us thought the pandemic would last as long as it has. With the high transmissibility of this thing, the sort of different responses different cities and governments had, the sort of lack of political will in most of the world, we don't do the New Zealand and Australia style zero COVID approach. And those are tough on those economies. But, I just figured it would have already spread to everyone. And then once the vaccines came out, we thought, oh, this would be great. Everyone will take a vaccine. They're proven to be safe. Millions of people have taken them. So I didn't think anybody thought we would be in this situation as long as we had. But what we did do was we recognized this is a really serious situation. Luckily, ClassPass had enough cash. We just raised a round and we had enough cash, and we were optimistic that we could survive the length of the pandemic. But we were really worried about our studio and gym partners and if they would be able to survive. And so we scrambled to pivot. And in about 10 days, we went from deciding to launch a live stream video platform to having that live in the app. And we decided to forego any revenue commissions. So our engineers and product team, kudos to them, they got a system set up so that all of our partners, studios and gyms, could kind of take their communities online with them, launch a Zoom class or Instagram Live or YouTube, whatever, and use ClassPass as a way for people to discover and pay for those classes. And we waived our commissions. We also mobilized a customer donation campaign for studios and gyms. We mobilized a political lobbying effort to try to get more consideration for studios and gyms in our countries. With some success, those have now been streamlined into broader industry coalitions like the Gyms Act and URSA and whatnot. So we scrambled, and then we had to make hard internal decisions. We had to lay off some really great folks at our company to just make sure that we, could control our costs until we had better line of sight coming out of it. So I think what I'm proud of is we made tough calls early and decisively and avoided, for example, on the layoff side, having to go through death by 1,000 paper cuts where you do a layoff, it's lasting longer. You do another layoff, it's lasting longer. You do a layoff. We did one. we did it while we could still afford to be really generous to those employees, while we had time to help them go, find new opportunities. And then we just hunkered down and focused on how do we push the ball forward? Well, yes, our video business is nice, but our customers really want in-person experiences. And so we really focused on building out our corporate business. So we now have Google, Amazon, Starbucks, Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, United Airlines, people like that use ClassPass to give their employees a fitness benefit. So we really doubled down on that program. And we really doubled down on pushing into wellness and beauty and spa salon, because one-to-one services are safer in a pandemic with an aerosol transmissible virus than a group experience, right? So we said, hey, this is a great time for us to really lean in on massage, nails, acupuncture, skin treatments, and things that are one-to-one, because they're much safer. Consumers felt safer doing those things. And we had confidence that people would want to come back, and that's exactly what we're seeing. We see almost an inverse relationship between digital usage and in-person. So the minute people feel safe, they go right back to in-person. Yeah. And the Delta variant has been a little bit of a speed bump coming out of COVID, obviously, depending on the city. But our users are overwhelmingly vaccinated, and so they're at lower risk, and they're excited to get back to in-person experiences.
Yeah, and so you touched upon the round of fundraising that you did, if I'm not mistaken, in January 2020, 285 million. Was that a blessing or a curse? And I'm going to try to unpack this a little bit. Was that a blessing because on one hand, you had cash, you had runway, you were able to pivot and finance that kind of global pandemic that was greatly impacting your business? Or was that a curse in a sense that, you sold to investor a growth rate over the coming years and an expansion plan, and basically a dynamic for the company that you instantly, because of the pandemic, weren't in position to deliver? How did that go?
Well, for me, unequivocally, it was a blessing. It was hard for those investors who put almost $300 million into a business that was rocket shipping with really strong unit economics and a really amazing team and was poised for greatness, to come in and say, yeah, we're going to shut the business down. And not just because we were forced to. We proactively decided we're going to freeze everyone's subscriptions. And then if they want to use our digital stuff, or if they still feel safe, they can unfreeze. And that was for new investors who put that much money into a company to come to a board meeting and hear the CEO that they just backed say, I'm going to proactively cut off our revenue. Because why? Because we're going to optimize for the long game. We think if we do this now, it's going to earn goodwill with our customers, and it's going to set up for less churn coming out of the pandemic. And that took investors who were well aligned to the long-term view, and that was something that we checked in our financing process, was, are these people aligned? Do they want to build a mega company? Or are they looking for a quick exit? And I think if we had chosen more short-term, more exit-oriented investors, maybe they wouldn't have, they would have fought me on that decision more. But the folks that we chose, Apax and now Catterton, and then Tomasik, who was an existing investor who was doubling or tripling down at that point, they believe in long-term vision here and believe we could build a generational company, that transforms hundreds of millions of lives. And so they let me do that. And that was hard. Those were hard conversations. That was a hard decision. That was really hard for those investors to go back to their partnerships and explain, we just put all this money into this thing. But the quid pro quo was we showed responsibility, right? We did do a layoff that was pretty extensive, and I think gave them confidence that we would run the business appropriately. But the reason it's unequivocally a blessing is any founder will tell you, I hear a lot of VCs say, be careful of raising too much money. I've never heard a founder be like, oh my God, I raised way too much money. That was a horrible mistake. Yeah, theoretically, constraints are good. Yes, it's forces you to innovate. But if you've been a founder, you've already been under constraints when you were starting the company or when you found product market fit. So usually founders know better than VCs, I think, how much money they should invest. We ended up raising in that round almost twice as much as we had set out to raise, because the demand was there and we liked the partners that we had options from. And we just said, what if there's a rainy day? We certainly didn't say what if there's a global pandemic, but we erred on the side of caution and probably gave up more dilution than we needed to, or than we thought we needed to. But man, that was a blessing for sure, unequivocally.
Yeah. What would have happened without this round 2 months before the beginning of that global pandemic?
That's a hell of a question. As an entrepreneur, I spend a little time thinking about that, but I'm so focused on, God, what is the next problem I have to solve, that I haven't spent much time thinking about it.
That's fair.
We would have had to probably had to put the company into sleep mode, and furlough everyone, cut down to bare minimum costs, and say, yeah, we have this digital thing. We would have ran the digital bet out and probably would have leaned harder into digital than we did. We asked customers, and our customers said, I'll do digital, but I still really want to do it in person. If we didn't have the funds to sort of wait it out with the team that we did, we might have had to take a stronger bet on digital and maybe go into more connected fitness. There's some awesome products there, and try to do a more fundamental pivot. And if that didn't work, we would have had to maybe put the company into sleep mode and just said, okay, we'll take it out of sleep mode when we come out of the pandemic. But that would have been pretty devastating, right? Because these companies are just a collection of great people. So, it would have been hard if we lost more than we did. It was already hard with the amount we had to lose and cut, and it would have been potentially lethal going through that process itself. So I don't know.
That's a good answer. I don't know. We're now coming out of COVID slowly but surely in different countries, and now we have a bit more visibility on reopenings. So what kind of quick decision or pivot you had to make product-wise as well as strategy-wise throughout the pandemic do you think is going to sustain in terms of the different type of usage that like the digital thing, for example? Do you see users kind of sticking to that and you weren't expecting it? Or is there like a fundamental pivot within the fitness industry that comes out of this pandemic, even though everything is slowly reopening?
Great question. Yeah, we definitely went through some pivots that we think are sustained. They're not digital. So we will continue to have digital as long as Apple's willing to not charge 30% for commission for these live stream classes. They've been generous and given us reprieves, and then now there's legal disputes with them and Epic, and I don't know, it's being resolved by people smarter than me. But digital is not our focus. Our customers are really focused on in-person experiences. There are customers who are digital only customers, and there's some customers who are hybrid, right, who want to do both. What we've discovered is we're not going to be the best at connected fitness, right? Peloton is the best at that, and Fight Camp, I'm an investor in Fight Camp. They're boxing, they're a great product, and Tonal, I have at home, resistance training, weightlifting system, awesome product. There's people who focus on that and are fantastic at it. But that customer is different. That customer has more disposable income, more space. They tend to be more suburban. They tend to be a bit older. Our customers are doing in person because of the immersiveness of the experience and the community. It's almost a social experience for people, right? And you just can't replicate that digitally. Maybe with VR headset on, but until VR headsets get a lot smaller and more comfortable, I don't, see people being able to do it.
The metaverse is coming.
Yeah. I don't see myself. I certainly couldn't do a CrossFit workout wearing a VR headset, right? So we'll see. But we don't believe that there certainly was an acceleration of the adoption of digital fitness because people were forced to try it. But we don't think that means it's the end of in-person. It's actually the opposite. And every time we see COVID cases go down, we see people flood back to in-person even stronger at a higher growth rate than they were before. And if we get a person that once we see a customer of ours go back to one class in person, they go back at 110% of the prior usage. So they're actually going back more than they were before the pandemic started. And then there's these customers who are hybrid. But what we've seen is that some of them use ClassPass, but some of them are like, well, I'll use ClassPass for my in-person and I'll use YouTube, or I'll use, Peloton's workout app for my digital. Like, consumers don't need to get everything from one provider. And so we just really focus on being the best in the world at connecting you to great prices and a great selection of in-person experiences. So we have digital. It's especially beneficial for our corporate customers who need a hybrid solution, but that's just not our focus. The pivots that we endured, that we did that will endure post-pandemic, are really the two that I mentioned. So the building out of our corporate business, which is going really well. It's a great channel. The expansion into wellness and beauty is just massive. There's more beauty and wellness businesses in the world. That TAM is even bigger than fitness. The one nice feature of that versus fitness is fitness, you have to kind of talk yourself into, right? Every time you work out, you're like, I need to convince myself to do it. Whereas a wellness or beauty treatment, doesn't take a lot of motivation to go get a massage, right? Or have a relaxing infrared sauna. So we really are excited about wellness and beauty, and we'll continue to double and triple down on that. And then one I didn't mention, but your prior question kind of reminded me of, is we we had to make our employees way more efficient. We had to really invest in our internal tools to get more productivity out of and more leverage for the less employees that we had to get the same amount of work done. And we had to get way more disciplined on the marketing side. Like our customer acquisition costs, our CAC have come way, 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 way down because we spent the last 18 months super laser focused on getting that into control, right? And we had been able to raise lots of money before, so we didn't have to be as disciplined on that front previously. We were just focused on growth and land grab and getting bigger and expanding into new categories. And the pandemic forced us to get a lot more disciplined and to invest in our internal tools. So now we're a much more efficient business, both from a marketing efficiency, but also just from we've invested in tools to make our employees more efficient and better and more leverage. And those, there's a good chance that we look out in 3 to 5 years and say ClassPass is, while we would have never liked going through the pandemic, it's a much better business as a result of having gone through the pandemic.
Yeah. And so coming out of the COVID question for a second, you are, as you mentioned, present in pretty much all around the world. Or let me frame that differently. What are the main differences in habits when it comes to the usage of ClassPass, depending on where you base geographically?
That's a super interesting question. The behavior is different by country, by city, and the pandemic induced some new behaviors. So like in London, people tend to work out after work. In New York, there's a lot of people working out before work. And so time of day and what genres people like are different geographically and by the tastes of the local community and culture. The good news for ClassPass is that we're not the ones figuring that out. It's the studio owners and gym operators and the entrepreneurs who are running these small businesses. They're the ones who find product market fit. What we do is we say, okay, when there's enough of these, enough variety in a particular zip code or postcode, that means that they've already proven that there's enough product market fit to support a variety proposition, a variety of different types of workouts. And so our proposition, which is seamless discovery, seamless booking to that variety, and discounted pricing, will likely appeal. People like good deals everywhere in the world. That's the one thing we found to be true. And people like variety everywhere in the world. China to New York City to Singapore to Sydney to Paris to Missoula, Montana. We have hundreds of customers here in Missoula. So to some extent, we're sort of insulated from those taste changes that happen because it's the local fitness entrepreneurs who are the ones navigating and figuring those how to evolve the local product for the local market. I'd say one interesting change though with the pandemic has been people are more mobile, right? So the shift to remote work is here forever, right? Like we were already doing it. We were a distributed company in New York, San Francisco, Missoula, Houston, London, Paris, Sydney, Singapore. So we've already been a Zoom company from before the pandemic because we had multiple offices even here in the US. So even if I'm here in a room with people, we had to have Zooms so people in New York or San Francisco could see. So the transition for us was a little bit less challenging, but certainly I think now everyone's realizing, okay, you can be pretty much as productive, in some cases more productive, by being remote. Some employees want an in-person experience, some want to be remote, some want a hybrid of the two options. That's probably the solution that's here to stay for most of us. And what that means for ClassPass is we have a lot of people who are nomadic. They'll travel, especially younger customers who are more flexibility, don't have kids. They can just be on the road, right? And going to Airbnbs or getting a Sprinter van or trying a new city for 3 to 6 months at a time. And we encourage our employees to do that. They can come to Montana for a snowboard winter or for a fly fishing and mountain biking summer and go to New York for spring and fall, which is the best seasons there in my opinion, or whatever, right? And so what we've seen is a lot more people taking advantage of the fact that ClassPass, doesn't matter where you go, you show up and you can get recommended classes and you can search classes in whatever town in whatever country you're in. We're in 30 countries and 1,000 cities. And so that has been, I think, a key shift and also to some extent the importance of adding digital as a benefit. Some customers when they're traveling, they don't have time to go to a workout or they don't want to go explore an in-person or there's a COVID outbreak in the city that they're traveling to. And so they want a quick digital option.
Got it. We talked a lot about ClassPass and a lot of the audience here now and also the audience who's going to watch this afterwards are early stage founders or entrepreneurs that are thinking about launching their business. We're coming out of a global pandemic that had like very deep impact on society in general. If you had to rebuild a business tomorrow as like a first-time entrepreneur or as an entrepreneur, and you had to build a business from the ground up, is there anything you would do differently based on the new reality?
I don't know that like COVID and the pandemic experience has like changed my attitude about like how to build a business, except I'd probably be much more open to remote workers. Like it's really hard to convince people in this day and age to, be in person in an office 5 days a week. And I think that is probably maybe the pivot. We already had a policy of being a distributed company, but we would still try to get people not to be remote. We'd say, hey, try working in one of our offices for a year and then go remote after you build relationships and know how the company works. And I just don't know if that's realistic. Like, I just think, there's a lot of great talent who doesn't need to be co-located physically with somebody, with the company to be really productive and happy. And I think if you're willing to embrace that, I think you open yourself up to a much bigger talent pool. Because after you have the right idea, the most important decisions you're going to make for the rest of the company are going to be all about who you hire. And so given the importance of those decisions and how much that will change your inflection, I think you need to give yourself access to the broadest talent pool possible, because of how important that will be. So I think that's maybe the one change. Would I do a business, that's in the music industry or fitness right now? Probably I wouldn't start one, right? But just because of, we don't know how much longer the pandemic's going to last. But, certainly we believe in the resilience of those industries and our industry. And everybody I know is dying to get back to in-person communal immersive experience.
Same here. So we witness similar trends. I want to move a bit into your Business Central activities, but before to do that, I remembered a question that I forgot to ask about ClassPass, because the list of questions that I had is also a list of questions that people suggested to ask you. And there's a question that is highly geographically oriented, which is about, is there anything planned with ClassPass for Paris Olympics 2024?
I wish that I was a good enough CEO to be planning that far in advance, but I don't know. But that's super exciting, and I need to chat to my wife. Maybe we'll have to get out there, and we're always looking for reasons to get to Paris. So that might be a good reason to think of an event to get out there and have a business excuse, and then mix that with some personal, and then do something with the Olympics. But we only plan on a 1 year. We have a 5-year vision, which is to expand to these new categories and expand beyond fitness. But we only plan 1 year in advance. So we write an annual strategy every year, a strategy memo every year that we publish, in December. And so gearing up to, I'm starting to think about 2022. So give me a few years, or at least another year or two, and then I'll come back on 2020.
Sounds good, but we're just like waiting to receive the well for those Olympics. So every time we're meeting people in the sport industry, we're asking that question to make sure they prepare something for the Olympics, because we're already here.
Congrats.
I want to move into a little bit of your experience as a business angel. You mentioned it. You have been a BA at Square, Pinterest, Wish, Lexport, Clubhouse, etc. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe your first deals, how you got into business angel activities, and are you still an active business angel? How do you find opportunities? How do you look at them?
It's a great story. My first investment. One lesson about how you get into investing, I'd say is put yourself in a position where you can offer something to an entrepreneur that is unique, right? Especially now. I mean, my first deal was in 2010. It was a small check, sadly, into Square. Jack Dorsey had left Twitter, was going to financial services, and had this idea with Jim McKelvey to build this little Square card that would let coffee shops take credit card payments. And
they actually just brackets and Square. They actually just launched in France today.
Oh wow! I'm surprised they weren't already there, but
it's big news.
It's an awesome company, and honestly, I just didn't know that much about payments, but I just knew what a huge industry it was and how arcane and backwards it was. And I'm like, Jack Dorsey created Twitter, so it's definitely special. I had Ron Conway, who is the godfather of Silicon Valley. He's like the original super angel. Him and his sons and his business partners invited me to a baseball game in San Francisco because I was a young executive at Microsoft doing corporate strategy and helping do deals. And we'd done the Facebook investment. And so I offered something to the tech community, which was access to Microsoft, and relationships. And I could get your company looked at for M&A or for an investment. And I could tell what Microsoft's strategic ambitions were and where partnership opportunities resided. And I was quite young, and so the entrepreneurs enjoyed hanging out with me and trusted me and stuff. And I had just a unique vantage point, having seen how one of the biggest, most successful software companies in the world would build and ship and sell software. And so I got invited to a baseball game, and I met Jack Dorsey, and I can't remember if it was Ron or maybe Brian Picorni, who was working for Ron, and said, invited me to the game and said, you should talk to Jack. He's got a new company he's doing, and met him. And I remember we had a conversation about Twitter, and I didn't really get Twitter. I mean, we'd looked at doing deals with Twitter before. At the time, I wasn't a user, and it's just like, I just don't get it. Yeah. And he was explaining how it was a new communication protocol and quite visionary. And so I created an account and started using it. Now I love it. Mostly a consumer versus an author or tweeter. But then he told me about Square, and I was just like, look, Jack Dorsey, payments, big problem area. I know nothing about it, but it's super interesting. And at the time, I was actually like, should Microsoft become a bank? We had so much cash, we could be a bank and try to disrupt the whole banking industry. We decided not to do that. But so I had some thoughts, and he said, hey, if you want to invest, let me know. And I followed up, thank God, and got a small allocation. And everybody and their brother wanted to invest after his success at Twitter. And it was a really high valuation, but I got a check in there. And that was my very first deal. And I started looking at more. I tracked down Uber, but failed to get an investment into Uber, which is probably one of my biggest mistakes. And started investing. And then I teamed up with another executive at Microsoft, Hank Behill, who had a lot more money than me, a lot more experience, and we started investing together. And one of our first deals together was Pinterest. And I'd gone to Yale with the founders to college, and kind of knew them. And a great other investor, Shanna Fisher, was leading the seed round that they were doing and showed it to us. And we decided to do that deal. And so those two companies started taking off, and I was like, oh, this isn't that hard. And now I've been humbled after, I'm reverting to the mean after my next 100 investments or whatever. But I just, that's how I got into it. It was sort of by accident, and just being intellectually interested and curious about what it takes to build a startup, and having something unique to add to the table to the startup, which was, I had a different network. I had a different vantage point. I had access and relationships at Microsoft, and that was unique. And so I had something unique to offer to the entrepreneur. And that's kind of been the theme. I try to find, as I built the business of angel investing out, I haven't been as active the last 2 years because I've just been so busy with ClassPass, but I still write a check occasionally. Usually it's to, an entrepreneur I know, or a friend, or a repeat entrepreneur I'm backing. But I still do deals, and reach out to me if you have a cool company. And I love helping entrepreneurs. We've just been super busy. So, but I really I've done so many investments, and a few good ones and lots of terrible ones, that I've stopped. Like in the beginning when I was doing it, I was a thesis driven investor. I would have a thesis for, how Internet of Things was going to evolve, or how enterprise software was going to evolve, or, the cloud or whatever. And if a company came and kind of matched that thesis, and if I liked the entrepreneur, I thought they were sharp and good, then I would invest. I've totally thrown that out the door. I'm not smart enough to have kind of a perfect model of the world. There's too many interesting opportunities in too many different areas. So now 90 to 95% of my evaluation of whether I'm going to invest is based on the entrepreneur, because great entrepreneurs pivot. I mean, look at Wish, one of my other most successful investments. When I invested, it was an AdSense competitor called Context Logic. And the company's parent name is still Context Logic, but the product is Wish. It's a shopping app, and it's totally different. And I remember when Peter told us that he was launching a shopping app, and we were like, that's not really the business we invested in, but okay. And we thankfully doubled down, put more money into it when he was pivoting it. But great entrepreneurs, Pinterest, the same thing. They started, it was an app, a shopping app called Tote, that didn't work. right?
Yeah.
Pivoted to Pinterest. Instagram was an app, a local app called Urban, didn't work. They pivoted to Instagram. So, all businesses are a series of S curves, right? You figure something out, you get great traction, you have to figure it out, get great traction. And so you zoom out, it looks like a big hockey stick, like Facebook. It looks like a huge hockey stick, but if you zoom in, it's a series of S curves. I stole that from Matt Kohler, who's a benchmark VC who worked at
Yeah.
Facebook. But to navigate those S curves, it's just all about the entrepreneur and how good she is going to be at identifying new opportunities, figuring out how to pivot, and so that's how I do it now.
Yeah. Any investment that you were particularly excited about and that didn't work out for a specific reason? Basically, an investment where you were
so many. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about every deal I do. Too many to list, and too many wild stories as to why they didn't work. The ones I can speak best to are my own experiences, right? So as an entrepreneur, so probably the one I was most excited about that didn't work was my superhuman hearing company called Doppler Labs that I co-founded. And we set out to build wireless earbuds before the AirPods existed. They were truly the first wireless earbuds that you could stream music to, but they also gave you super hearing. So you could like zoom in on certain stuff. You could try to suppress noise in your audio scene. We would give you proactive recommendations for how to change your noise settings based on your filters, based on what we were detecting in your audio scene and location. It was super cool. Basically, contextually aware hearing was the technical North Star. We had cool patents on machine hearing. We had great engineers, and the company didn't work. And ultimately, hardware is just exponentially harder to do than software, right? You just have more vectors. You have the software part that's hard to execute on, but then you add the hardware part that's really hard to execute on, and then you add the kind of ops and manufacturing side that's just exponentially more difficult and exponentially more capital intensive than software companies. And there we had regulatory issues, like we couldn't brand it as a hearing aid because here in the US, the FDA wouldn't let you do that. So we couldn't say it's $200 hearing aid, which would have been really nice because hearing aids are such a crazy oligopoly, overpriced racket market. So we ran into regulatory issues, and ultimately hardware was just too expensive. The product was pretty good, not perfect. We didn't have enough battery life, when we launched before the iPhone, but had great user feedback, great reviews, and it was kind of working. It just to take it to the level we needed to, we would have had to raise, $100 million. And VCs were sort of sour on hardware after some other well-known hardware startups just had failed and stuff, and so it was just too hard to get funded.
Yeah. I just saw the question of Mario in the chat. And by the way, guys, if you want to ask more questions, go for it. We now have some time to cover them. So it's actually a pretty similar question than the one I just asked with a more macro lens. Any trends or theme that you saw coming a few years ago that maybe led to a couple of investment that never materialized, I guess, trends?
Well, I think the trends are kind of obvious. It's really like the timing of the trends that I've had a harder time with. A trend that I identified and didn't invest in and should have was crypto, right?
Okay. Did you change your mind on crypto and now you're an investor in crypto, or?
I wish that I had. I wish I'd put a bunch of money into Bitcoin. I had friends who were doing it, and I'd been a gold investor during the ahead of the Great Recession, and so I sort of had some intellectual understanding of it. My problem with crypto has been I just haven't really seen. I always questioned like anytime any of the companies I want to build would probably be better off being built centralized. It's just faster to execute. It's literally faster from a processing or query standpoint, less energy consumptive. And so I've been waiting and on the sidelines. Luckily, I'm an investor in some funds that have bought a lot of Solana early on and stuff, and so have some good exposure through them. But I'm just not an expert in the space, so I try to avoid things that I'm not smart enough on. And I've yet to see I don't use any apps that are decentralized. And maybe I would if I was doing international money transfer. I think that's the main one that I've seen that people are actually using. Otherwise, it seems speculative. But another example of a trend that I got really excited about, tried to convince Microsoft to put a bunch of money behind, they didn't, which is probably the right recall, but is now working out was genomics and the implications of cheap, fast, accurate genomic sequencing and what that would do for revolutionizing healthcare. I was way early on that. I mean, this was 2009 that I was trying to get people to do it at Microsoft and invest in it. And the tech just took longer. But now, like, it's like a famous Bill Gates saying, right? It's like, you know, you think it's going to happen. It like takes longer than you think, but then when it happens, the transitions happen faster. And my dad actually ended up being chief medical officer of a cancer genomics company called Guardant Health, which can diagnose if you have cancer, but the type and the genetic variant, and then match your treatments to that genetic variant. It's called Guardant Health, and it's an awesome company. And I missed investing in that because I kind of had been like, oh, I don't know, maybe this genomics thing's not going to happen on the time frame I had because I've been waiting for 5 or 6 years. And so now I think we're hopefully on the verge of that starting to permeate how we all get our medical treatments. You know, is sequence your DNA, the sequence your phenotype, and how your genes are expressing themselves, and then they can match treatments to it. So I've usually been right on trends. Crypto maybe being the one exception on most of the major macro trends the last 10 or 15 years. But timing is really fucking hard.
Yeah. Maybe another question on crypto, like we've seen, especially coming out of the US, like a bunch of big companies putting crypto on their balance sheet. Is that something that you thought about, considered? Not at all? What do you think?
Talked about it. Yeah, it's just too volatile. Like right now, it's too much of a speculative asset as opposed, it's not really being used as a reserve currency. It's, you know, yes, there's, you know, a few companies, and what was it, Chile, who's starting to do it, or some Latin American country last week. Crypto people are going to kill me for not knowing this, but it might and should happen. It's smart, it's logical, but while it's a speculative asset with incredibly high volatility, there's just not appetite from my CFO or my board, I don't think, to just, you know, have that much fluctuation.
Fair. Okay. We have another question from Thomas that asks, how do you see ClassPass going versus competition right now?
That's a good question. I mean, things are going pretty well. Again, the whole industry has been really hurt by the pandemic, you know, but we've been pretty lucky. We're sort of the biggest player. We had a lot of intense competition in the US in the early days. We acquired a company called FitMob and Merge, and that made us the biggest player in the US. Then we expanded to Southeast Asia and East Asia and acquired a company there called GuavaPass, and that kind of gave us a really strong leadership position. You know, we're the biggest player in the UK by a long shot. And then we went into continental Europe, and there's a variety of competitors. Kind of in each country, there's a different one. And we feel pretty good about how we've competed, especially in France and in the Netherlands and some markets. In Germany, there's a really strong company that is, you know, similar to ClassPass, that has raised a lot of money and is really good entrepreneurs executing well. So, you know, we haven't had as much success in Germany, but we keep trying. We have B2B competition who focuses more on just the corporate side. GymPass is an incredibly well-funded player in that space. They've got a really nice business, especially in Latin America. But I don't know, you know, most startups succeed or die because of suicide instead of, you know, fratricide, right? Or murder. You don't typically see people just wiping each other out. It's usually you can control your own destiny by making the right strategic decisions. And honestly, we think of our biggest competitor, like when we ask our users, like, why aren't you using ClassPass, or why'd you quit? Or it's motivation inertia, like they just lost their motivation for working out. So hopefully by adding beauty and spa salon and wellness, that will help with that problem. And the other competitor for us that we mostly think about is Instagram and Netflix. Like people just staying at home, watching TV, being lazy, you know, faffing around on social media instead of going out and having in-person experiences or having workouts or doing wellness. So we spend a lot more time. We maybe don't spend enough time thinking about competition. Maybe we should spend more on that. But once you get product market fit and you're in that growth phase, you're kind of figuring out how to optimize your own trajectory. If a competitor starts to be the thing that's stopping that trajectory, then maybe we'd focus on it more. But right now, the competitor is really motivation and people's attention, you know, and time on TV and social media.
Maybe to follow up on that question, it's very interesting you mentioned Instagram and Netflix as competitor. Like, do you have some sort of dystopic vision of the future when it comes to how people are gonna use social media and how it's gonna disrupt life? Like, do you think that we are at the peak, or do you think that we're just at the beginning and that the current young generation is just gonna like keep scrolling?
I mean, I don't know if it's a dystopian future. It's maybe a dystopian present. Like,
Mhm.
just look at like political elections and how influential these social platforms are, and how easily manipulated they are by foreign actors, right? Like, um, or let's just take the vaccines. Like, I think Paul Graham had this great tweet where he said something like, a dystopian novelist could have thought up the pandemic, but they could have never predicted the politicization of taking a vaccine. It's like, what's that? Like, really? Like, you're being routed to fringe media content that is brainwashing you into thinking these things are dangerous, or that COVID's not real, or the media is overestimating, these things. Meanwhile, here in Missoula, Montana, we're having to call the National Guard in to help the nurses because there's so many people, in the ICU, and they're turning the ambulance bays into a, hospital bed. Even now, 9 months after vaccines have been or 8 months after vaccines have been widely, available. So, so I don't know if it's a dystopian future or a dystopian present. And one of my investors at ClassPass is a guy named David Fialco. He produced an Academy Award-winning documentary called Icarus,
Yeah.
and it showed, how it talks about the doping scandals. He did another movie that was about how some Middle Eastern autocracies have used social media to manipulate people. And so I'd recommend checking out his movies, because he's done some interesting work on this stuff. But yeah, I think it's pretty bad as it is. It's sort of hard for me to imagine it getting worse. Like foreign actors with an agenda have been able to divide Western countries and civilizations and weaponize social media and for political purposes. So it was. I think people are going to remain highly engaged in social media. I don't think that's going to go away. I think you're going to see increased regulation over how these social media companies operate. Hopefully, more social responsibility, and I'm just hoping that we can convince you to put the screen down and get back out into the real world, because ultimately we think the key to sort of human happiness is having great family and friends, great work to do, and then filling your free time with great experiences with the people you like. Like, I don't think when you survey people on their deathbed, they're like, I wish I'd scrolled more on Facebook or Instagram. Like,
Yeah.
I think they say, I wish I had more experiences with the people I care about. And,
Mm.
but that's our job to change that future. I don't think it's sort of predetermined. I think it's going to depend on how the social media companies execute and evolve, how governments regulate them, and then how companies like ClassPass execute in convincing you to take your head out of the screen and go have more experiences.
I love that, and I think it's a perfect way to kind of end our discussion today. Well, Fritz, I just want to thank you for allocating some time to talk with us in the community. Also, want to extend an invitation whenever you're in Paris to both Station F and just meeting some entrepreneurs here. And yeah, so now I hope that everybody online is gonna go on ClassPass. We have a nice perk at Station F available, by the way, doing a bit of
Awesome.
advertising for the perks at Station F. But yeah, discount for the community. So hopefully everybody's going to check it out. And yeah, thank you so much, Fritz.
Thanks for having me. Great to see everyone. Thanks for the great questions.
Thank you. Have a great day. Okay.
All right. Ciao.
Bye.